fighting games really do come in all shapes and sizes. From the traditional to the groundbreaking, from the industry legends to indie projects helmed by one person, from 2D to 3D, from weapons-based to being stripped down to its basic elements, from gods of war to gods of hip-hop, from games where you turn into animals to games where you already are animals. If there's a situation that would lead to two individuals, or sometimes more, facing each other in combat, chances are there's a fighting game based around it. This, of course, is old news. If you've paid any sort of attention to fighting games in the last couple decades, you have seen the continuous struggles of heroes and villains, champions and cosmic entities alike entangled in the eternal battle for glory and power. And so the cosmic ballet goes on. Which was originally where this video was heading. A way to look at the almost unending creativity of fighting game concepts, since if you really think about it, there's only so much you can do with player 1 punching player 2 or vice versa until their life bar runs out. And still, fighting games have constantly managed to reinvent themselves and add new ideas and concepts, with varying degrees of success. Assists, weapons, giant mechs, destructible environments, usage of vertical space as opposed to the horizontal space, rhythm elements, and whatever the fuck is happening with Yoshimitsu. During these early years of exploration, we run into a couple of surprising examples of the fighting game version of throw shit at the wall and see what sticks, as well as companies scrambling to bring out the next Street Fighter challenger and carve out a little piece of the arcade floor for themselves. Some companies even completely switched gears mid-development on a game in process to turn it into a fighting game and capitalize on the market. A game that, I will argue in this video, is more important than you might think, but not for the reasons you're expecting. Yeah, it's the dinosaur game. Okay, I realize I may have lost some of you right there, but if you'd be so kind, stay with me and hopefully you can see where I'm going with this. See, I'm in no way saying that Dino Rex is a title of historical significance, or that it's an underrated classic that could have been perfect if it just had a little bit more time in the oven. Far from it. Dino Rex is kind of a meme. It's an imperfect, loud, brash, obnoxious, and quite frankly bizarre experience. Dino Rex is a fever dream where it really takes you a few moments to realize that what you're seeing, and in the case of Pachi, what you're hearing, is actually the game. For all intents and purposes, Dino Rex is a bad game. Or, to be more specific, a game that people might refer to as bad. But really, what makes a game bad? So I took to Twitter, or X, to ask some of you what might drive you to call a fighting game bad. Or better yet, see if there's any consensus as to what a bad game generally is. And not only did a couple of you immediately pinpoint the main argument for this video, but you also brought up some really good points as to what your fighting game turnoffs are. Slow or limited movement, unresponsive buttons, extremely one-sided interactions, soulless or uninteresting characters, timer scams, buggy to the point of being nearly unplayable, and many other great points. I'm gonna link the thread below because I think there was a lot of insightful commentary in it, adding to that whole subjectivity of bad versus good in fighting games. I think a perfect summary of all those bad elements can be found in that punk's video review of Vampire Combat, which I am being informed is apparently a fighting game. I'll link that one below because if you want a true distillation of what bad really means in terms of fighting games, there's a perfect example. And also, shoutouts to that punk. That said, there are a few comments that I wanted to bring attention to because they kind of encapsulate how I've come around on Dino Rex as the years have gone by. Comments like, nothing. People are just cowards. I would make an important distinction between this game sucks and this game sucks. That's hard to say. I'd even say a game like Dino Rex, which has multiple failings as a fighting game, is good to me because it helped me grow closer to my friends. Dino Rex is a game that has a lot of the issues that we just pointed to as being exemplary of a bad game. The controls are not that responsive, movement can be very slow, some moves will just outright keep your opponent locked out from playing, you can timer scam with Triceratops, which is actually kind of hilarious. I mean, look at him go. It is a lawless wasteland with limited movement, broken characters, the weirdest sound effects in a fighting game, convoluted inputs, and even so, it's a game that managed to get hundreds of entrants and a prize pool of over $2,000 back in 2022. More than some good games. So how can that be? My take, aside from that whole haha funny dinosaur shitpost thing, is that there are things that we can learn from Dino Rex. Things about game development, things about community, and the joy of something bad. Its campiness, and underneath it all, its heart. But to really dive into it, let's take it from the top. Dino Rex was released in 1992 by Taito, a company you might recognize for games like Puzzle Bobble. Originally, it started its development as a shoot-'em-up, in the vein of the development team's previous titles, Metal Black and Gun Frontier, which, side note, if you get a chance to play, are actually really cool titles. The game's direction drastically changed in 1991 with the release of Street Fighter II: The World Warrior. This led Taito, and in turn the development team, to want to capitalize on the fighting game boom of the early 90s and retool Project D-Rex, as it was known at the time, into a fighting game. For their aesthetic, the team worked with stop-motion animation by creating claymation models of the dinosaurs. This was reminiscent of 1988's Chinese Exorcist, or Reikaidoshi, which is widely considered to be the first fighting game that uses this technique. What this also means is that Dino Rex beat Primal Rage to the claymation dinosaur saws by around 2 years. Dino Rex is a 2-button fighter, which might make you believe that the game's execution is straightforward, but you'd be oh so wrong. In the dinosaur side of things, the buttons are labeled as punch and kick, yet each one corresponds to a specific part of the dinosaur. Punch for bites and claws, and kick for tail. The game features mainly command specials as opposed to traditional special inputs, with a huge asterisk we'll get back to later. You see, the special moves for the dinosaurs are typically performed by pressing up, up forward, and a button, or down, down forward, and a button. The up one is worthy of looking at since Dino Rex doesn't give you the usual tap up to jump or even a jump button. Hell, it doesn't even have diagonal jumps. Instead, in what I can only assume is an inclusion to show the dinosaur's weight, you need to hit down and then up for them to jump. They're hefty fellas, so they require a bit of a boost.
Damn, boy, he's thick!
As far as more traditional special moves, some of the dinosaurs make use of charge inputs, although the timing of them seems to vary depending by dinosaur, for reasons, and half circle down motions. Gold Lewis players rejoice, you are not alone. So for example, for these special moves you would input 8, 7, 4, 1, 2, and a button. Yes, this is numpad notation, you will learn it. Fun fact, you actually are supposed to enter half circle down and then quarter circle forward for the move to come out. You don't need to complete the full motion, you just need to do from up to down and a button. Anyway, carrying on. That explanation about the buttons only applies to the dinosaurs, because if for some reason you finish your match in a draw, then you are greeted with the sudden death minigame, where instead of the dinosaurs, you play as their human managers. In that case, you gain access to the quarter circle forwards, the quarter circle backs, and all the DPs your heart could desire. Which genuinely begs the question of why only this portion of the game has access to those moves, since the development team obviously had ways of putting them into the game. Truly, it's one of the mysteries of Dino Rex. With a robust cast of 6 characters, unorthodox controls, and sound design that can best be described as the US intervention in Panama, Dino Rex garnered notoriety as one of those bad games lost to time, resurfacing every so often as part of a Taito collection, a mystery game tournament, or it was largely related to the annals of history. A symbol of an era where everyone tried to hop on to the fighting game craze. That is, until the era of Fightcade. To understand how the biggest Dino Rex bracket of all time even happened, as well as its importance, we must look back at how we got there. From around 2020 onwards, I can personally recall Dino Rex starting to pop up in conversation in various FGC discords and channels. Part of it was the ever-present curiosity of those, let's say, underappreciated fighting games, while the other part was a bit more reaction-focused. You see, I would even go as far as to call it a rite of passage to be sitting in a Discord, asking around for games, maybe on Fightcade, and then someone says, "Oh, we should play Dino Rex," which would inevitably lead to sitting on the VC and hearing the other person's reaction to... While that's all well and good, around that time we do start seeing players who actually try and have a look at what's under the surface, rather than just, haha, screechy dinosaur game. People who are genuinely appreciative of the rawness and just sheer lunacy that is Dino Rex. We'll definitely get back to this later when I actually get to my point, which I swear the point is coming. But all of these elements collided into the perfect storm that was 2022 and the bracket. I think the first thing to point out here is that this was not the first Dino Rex bracket held via Fightcade. Far from it. One of the main reasons we even started seeing folks play more was the events that were popping up and showcasing the title. Whether it was as a joke, a mystery inclusion, or a wildcard part of a charity event, the word spread around about this weird fucking game. So much so that during one of Alex Alchemy's charity events, specifically Act 5, I made a bet. I bet them that if the charity donations reached over a certain amount, I would personally run a bracket for Dino Rex as part of the ACP Tuesday Throwdown series. Well, it turns out they did, and I had to put my money where my mouth was. This inadvertently led me to diving deeper into the game and actually discovering that this absolute trash fire of a title was actually kind of really fun. So, we went all in. We started promoting the bracket with the tagline, "The biggest prize pool in Dino Rex history." A tongue-in-cheek commentary on the fact that this game probably had not received any sort of prize pool support for an event, and any amount we ended up adding to it would essentially end up being the largest prize pool by default. The goal was actually to have a couple players and maybe like $1 or $5 as a gag, but I think the dinosaur fire spread so fast, netting us around 128 entrants, plus a dozen more in a waiting list, because of one of the main points that I will totally be making soon, guys. There's a point and it's coming. But before I do, I genuinely want to give a huge shout out to everyone who participated in that bracket. Players, TOs, streamers, commentators, shitposters. It was, without a shadow of a doubt, and without exaggerating, the most fun I have ever had in a fighting game related event in my life. Oh, yeah, so about that point. Dino Rex is a B-movie. Dino Rex is the Troll 2 of fighting games. For those of you who may not be overly familiar with what constitutes a B-movie, it's a term commonly used to refer to a low-budget commercial film, typically meant to be a companion piece to a main film. Think of a B-side in terms of music. It's made cheaply, but it's not meant to be bad. It just ends up as bad due to it being hastily made, wanting to capitalize on some trend, or just doing what it can with what it has available in terms of funds, actors, production, etc. However, while the term has seen various definitions, I think this old Reddit post from a deleted user kind of encapsulates it perfectly. As we read it, I kinda want you to keep Dino Rex in the back of your head. A lot of it may come down to know it when you see it. I guess the best emotional response I could provide, to expand on the definition, is that a B-movie is a cheap emulation of a mainstream film. A low-budget stab at drawing in viewers. For example, B-movie horror films are cheap trend followers trying to cash in on the success of a popular genre that's emerged. See all those 80s slasher films following on the heels of Halloween, Friday the 13th, and the zombie films of the 2000s. I'll leave the full post if you guys want to check it out, because there's quite a spirited discussion on that Reddit post about B-movies. But I want you to keep that in mind, because now we're going back to the dinosaurs. See, fighting games tend to have a lot of superlatives thrown around when it comes to discourse. The worst fighting game, the most broken fighting game, the most difficult fighting game, the strangest fighting game, you name it. And while Dino Rex may be considered by some as one of the worst fighting games, I wholeheartedly disagree. Dino Rex contains most of the elements of what folks might consider makes a game bad, but contrary to something like Vampire Combat, it is almost endearing in its badness. It's like a B-movie being originally made in earnest, but becoming a campy cult classic due to cheesy effects, loose plot threads, amateur acting, you name it. This is in direct opposition of a movie that sets out to try and be bad on purpose. You can think of all those like scary movie clones that we had in the mid-2000s. Contrary to something that's truly bad, Dino Rex contains within its badness various stories and lessons. For example, the lesson of what happens when a development team is shaken up and taken out of their element at the last minute due to a company wanting to play catch up with the fighting game market without truly knowing how. And even then, introducing elements that, while not well known or even implemented fully at the time, set the stage for fighting games for years to come. I'll remind you that the Dino Rex Roar Meter in 1992 is one of the first iterations of a resource system in a fighting game. This system would later come to be refined in Kaiser Knuckle, but still predates Super Turbo by 2 years, predates Samurai Showdown 1 by a whole year, and is only beaten, as far as I can tell, by the first Art of Fighting by around 2.5 months. This means that our little dinosaur game beat a lot of big fighting games to the Super Meter punch. One of the other big lessons we can take away from seeing Dino Rex as a B-movie is the fact that sometimes the joy of sharing in something traditionally considered bad warps around to making it good again. Think of trauma movies, or think of Slumber Party Massacre 2. Objectively, you'll run into some exquisite acting, half-baked effects, and the plot that is held together by duct tape. But at midnight, while under the influence of your totally legal substance of choice, nothing hits quite like it. This whole spin on finding the good within the bad gets us people genuinely putting in the work for learning the characters, developing strategies, and finding the haha funny buttons within the game. Like I did mention in the Street Fighter the movie video, sometimes you just want to see how far you can push a game's engine. For a recent example, just late last year we actually got new Dino Rex tech, courtesy of Cross Mirage, or Kinetic Harvest on Twitter. Turns out that for the longest time it had been presumed that Patchy could not eat the pterodactyl egg. Okay, I should explain. You see, during a match, a pterodactyl will sometimes swing by and drop an egg, which, if eaten, will give the player a specific boost. However, the input to eat the egg is P, or punch. This does not work with Patchy. Thanks to the recent discovery, we now know that it didn't work with Patchy because of the hitbox, but Patchy can still eat the egg if he instead uses 3P, which is the down-forward punch. Even 31 years after its release, we're still discovering new details about the video game. We also get Go Billy's incredibly detailed guide on Dino Rex, which, for a game where even jumping needs an explanation, is an invaluable resource. I distinctly remember when the dinosaur bracket was starting to pick up steam, they posted on Twitter like, I have no idea why, but my game facts on Dino Rex got a bunch of hits out of nowhere. Like, genuinely, if you go in there right now, and you take a look at the game facts, tell me that it's not more in-depth than what some communities have for their more popular titles. Speaking of communities, I think one of the biggest points that I'd like to make is that look at the big Dino Rex bracket. Look at the noise that was made for an underappreciated, janky, noisy, and bizarre title. Look at all the people behind the scenes that worked their ass off to make sure that it flowed as smoothly as possible, or as smoothly as a Dino Rex bracket can run. Look at the love that went into the streams, and look at the Matcherino. Look at how over $1,000 were donated to charity and members of the community in need. And when you do, think about what we as a community are able to do for games that we love when we put our hearts into it. Look at the work that people like Toast Rider, Go Low, Beebus are doing for Samurai Showdown 6. Look at Vortex Gallery and 956 Productions. Look at the JoJo's ASBR community who, despite the game's atrocious netcode, have kept it alive online with parsec tournaments, with information, with constant updates of the wiki. Look at Vampire Arcadia. There is nothing holding us back from putting in the effort to make sure that the games we love, be it ironically or unironically, get this same kind of exposure. Look at how we can take the bad dinosaur game and make something good out of it. Because I've always said that the most important aspect of a game, the soul of that title, is in its community. It's those who show up for fun, for the grind, for a good time, or even for a bad time, quote unquote, that ends up being enjoyable when shared with others. What matters most is finding that community, that spark of joy in even the jankiest titles and having that laugh. Having an actual moment of, I can't believe this is real. It's about having fun after all, because if you're not having fun, why are you even doing this? This is exactly why we go see midnight movies and why we watch cheesy 80s slasher flicks. Because at the end of the day, they mean something to us. They elicit that response in us. They give us joy. They matter. And that's why titles like Dino Rex truly matter. Hey everyone, Editing Crab here. I wanted to make a few corrections on some of the information. First of all, when I described the game as a trash fire before, what I was trying to say is that that was my perception of the game at the time, before I actually looked into it. Secondly, in the part where I mentioned that you have to press up and a button to have some attacks come out, what I really meant to say is up, forward and a button, and up, back and a button. If you hold up, you will only get the roar. And lastly, I've stopped thinking about Dino Rex as a fighting game, and I've started thinking about it more as rock, paper, scissors with dinosaurs. When you really look at the Mikado footage, which I'm going to be linking below, check out how they play and tell me that's not exactly what the game is. Alright, anyway, play Dino Rex. It's actually really fun. I know, but it's fun. Lower the volume if you must, but give it a shot.